and gentlemen, welcome to my channel. "2024 FIDE circuit, Fabiano Caruana has secured the top spot and qualifies for the candidates tournament. The following chess updates include information sourced from FIDE's official website. And for those of you who are interested, feel free to check out their site for more details. And as we can see here, I have this photo placed. We see that 2024 FIDE circuit, the winner is Fabiano Caruana. This means that he has secured a spot in the 2026 the candidates tournament. With the conclusion of the final major event of 2024, the World Rapid and Blitz Chess Championships, the race for the 2024 FIDE circuit has come to an end. In this whole circuit thing, players they score points, and the higher the points they score, the more points they score, the higher their rankings will be. The race has come to an end. American Super Grandmaster Fabiano Caruana successfully secured his spot in the 2026 candidates tournament. Over the course of the year-long tournament, there are many grandmasters who are actually really close to Fabiano's footsteps. As we can see here, we have this result, the leaderboard. We see that Fabiano is in first, and we have Indian chess prodigy Arjun Nergezi in second. Also, Uzbekistan's rising star Nodirbek Abdusattorov. Basically, it's a fight between these three players, because we see that in fourth place, Firouzja, he only has 88 points, whereas in the top three players, they already had 100 and more points. But Arjun is even closer to Fabi. And we see that there are these three players, they're all strong contenders for the top position. For most of the year, the talented Indian player Arjun Nergezi held the lead. However, in the final stretch, Fabiano, he surged ahead by clinching back-to-back victories at the US Championship and the Sinquefield Cup, overtaking Nergezi to claim the top spot. The World Rapid and Blitz Chess Championships served as the final opportunity to secure points for the 2024 FIDE circuit leaderboard. Unfortunately for Nergezi, he was ranked number 5 in the Rapid Championship and failed to make the top 8 in the Blitz, which means that he couldn't reach the knockout section of the Blitz, and which means that he is eliminated basically. So he didn't play extremely well in the 2024 the Rapid and Blitz Chess Championship, but still he has a really high score, the points. In the end, though, Caruana, he managed to hold onto his lead and earn a confident ticket to the 2026 candidates tournament. He is only 6 points lead, but that is just enough for him to secure the spot. And notably, this marks Caruana's 6th consecutive qualification for the candidates tournament. A remarkable achievement, actually, that is. What does this tell us? As a Chinese saying goes, it's this way: 姜还是老的辣. Meaning experience matters. As a veteran player, Caruana has been in the chess world for a very long time already. His strength is undeniable, but also he has a lot of experiences in top events. And as the new year begins, the 2025 FIDE circuit is already underway, which means that players can fight for a new leaderboard. The top player on the 2025 leaderboard will also qualify for the 2026 candidates tournament, which means that besides Fabiano Caruana, other players still have chances. And according to FIDE regulations, the 2024 World Chess Championship counts toward the 2025 FIDE circuit standings. Ding Liren of China, who finished as the runner-up, is currently in the lead with 60 not 60, but if I'm not mistaken, 40.64 points. And if Ding, he remains active and competes in more top events and keeps scoring, then I sincerely hope that he can achieve something extraordinary in this new year. But anyways, today we're going to be analyzing one of Caruana's games, recent games, and better understand the fighting style of this incredible player, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Also, before we take a look at this game, I also have this thing, like this, some details about the 2025 FIDE circuit for you guys. Now, this is from the original homepage of FIDE. Here, if you want to know more, you can go to this full regulations, which I'm not going to read everything to you guys. You guys can basically scan it or stop the video to look at the details, but you guys can also just search FIDE's homepage, original homepage. Yeah. Alright, but anyways, now let's go into this game. This game was played in the 2024 the Grand Chess Tour Field Cup, where Fabiano Caruana, he managed to be in second place in this tournament. In first place, there's Alireza Firouzja, but second place is not bad, of course, with so many strong players. And in this game, Fabiano is playing against Uzbekistan's rising star Nodirbek Abdusattorov, who is also really, really strong. Let's see how this game went. Fabi started with e4 with the white pieces, and Nodirbek decided to play e5. Knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4. So this is nothing special, the Italian. Knight f6, d3, bishop e7, short castle, castle, rook e1, d6. a4 was played. This is classical chess, so it's really slow, and both sides have a lot of time to think. But it's a classical game, so you also have a lot of time to prepare for it. And both sides here didn't spend much time in the opening. Here, Nodirbek played bishop e6, and Fabi played knight d2, bishop c4, knight takes c4, a5. So this is the two knights, the modern bishop's opening in the Italian. It's a really confusing name, but it is just called this way. This is an opening that is, really positional, full of positional play, and you have to evaluate this position. First, let's compare the activeness of each piece. You see, white's two rooks and the queen are kind of exactly like black's two rooks and the queen, so the major pieces are kind of the same. The pawn structure is exactly the same, which means we have the minor pieces left on the board. These two knights, I think white's c4 knight especially is really active, and the bishop also, we see that it's the same colored bishop, same squared colored bishop, which means that this bishop is definitely more active than the e7 bishop, because it is it has this open diagonal. Also, the pawns are on light squares, whereas for this bishop, it is right now being blocked by the d6 pawn and the f6 knight, which is not that active so far, which means that this position, white is slightly better. So that's basically how we evaluate a position. We first of all take a look at the pawn structures, then compare the activeness of the pieces, the major pieces, the minor pieces, and yeah, that's basically how we evaluate, also including some calculations. In the game, Fabi played bishop g5, the best move. Knight d7 was played. Also, just to add that here, knight g4 is also possible, because after takes, the point is that black just lures white to play this h3 move, and then just goes back to f6. Because later on in the game, knight h5, knight f4 will be a threat, and at that point, g3 is not a move that is that easy to be played, because the h3 pawn might be a small weakness. So knight g4 is another possible idea, but instead in the game, knight d7 was played, which is also fine, and then bishop takes, queen takes. Now you might be wondering, I just said that white's bishop is slightly more active than black's bishop, right? So why trade off the bishops? Well, the reason for that is actually because if you don't do it, playing other moves, for example, like c3, d4 ideas are possible, but Bishop g5, knight d7. After taking, now you realize that d4 is suddenly possible. Because before, at this point, you can't really go d4 immediately because after takes, there's some sort of c5 ideas. Or, actually, there's d5 here. And after takes, black manages to take off everything. And this bishop is suddenly, open, like all the diagonals are open to it. So what I'm trying to say is that this bishop right now is kind of passive, but later on black is going to be pushing d5 at any time. Even right now, if white doesn't do anything, d5 is coming, this bishop will be activated really soon, and white needs to do something. Because once d5 was played and then the bishop goes to c5, it's actually really hard to tell which bishop is more active. Maybe black's bishop is even more active than white's bishop. So anyways, but bishop g5 is the best move to get the bishops off the board. And now white's idea is to go d4 here because after takes, no, d5 is no longer possible because, no pieces are defending it. And that is why in the game, rook f e8 was played instead. Now, of course, this position, already there's a couple of minor pieces off the board and a pair of pawns off the board. And it looks like this position is really pretty much simplified, right? There's only knights, queens, and rooks on the board, very close to an endgame, and this looks likely going to end in a draw because the pawn structure is also pretty fine, like normal for both sides. But white is slightly better here, and the reason for that is that, first of all, white has a really strong center. White has a little bit more space. Also, rook e3 ideas are possible at any time. e5 is an idea. d5 is well being prevented. c6 can never be pushed because the d6 pawn is a weakness. And as for white, f3 is also always possible to defend the e4 pawn. So this means that here black does have a few weaknesses or have a few challenges here. And in the game, queen d2 was played. Also, f3 is possible, like to defend the e4 pawn. f3 is another way, but queen d2 was played instead, which is not a bad move because you are also, like here attacking the a5 pawn, that is. Here, black played queen h4, which is kind of logical because you're threatening to take on e4. But here you can actually just go knight c5, for example, and use the knight to attack the e4 pawn. Probably now, f3 is not good because there's this really tricky move, knight a4, and after rook takes, there's b5, winning the piece back. And probably here, if you take on a8, takes, the pawns are equal, this is going to likely end in a draw. However, in the game, instead of playing knight c5, queen h4 was played. And now f3, defending the pawn, rook e6, we see that Nodirbek's idea is actually to swing the rook to the king side to launch some counter play on the king side towards white's king. That is black's idea. But it's actually not that deadly because the queen is always able to defend the g2 pawn. And right now, rook h6 doesn't really do anything because always h3 or g3 is possible. And all white needs to do is actually just be sure you don't blunder any tactics and get your knights and get your pieces to the best squares. Also note that here, you cannot take on a5 because there's rook h6 now. And if you go h3, there's now knight e5. Black is sacrificing a pawn, but successfully getting all of the pieces towards the king side. And there's actually a lot of pressure because knight f3 might at some point be a threat. Rook g6 also, putting a lot of pressure on the h3 and f3 pawn. This is not easy for white to play. White needs to defend with rook a3 here to gain control, like to keep an eye on the f3 and h3 pawn. But it's not easy for white to play for a win here if you play knight a5. And in the game, knight e3 was played, a very logical move, maneuvering the knight, because now if you go rook h6, there's now h3 and knight f5 on the next move, pinning the rook and, not pinning, but forking the rook and the queen. In the game, however, queen g5 was played, very logical to pin the knight and the queen. And now for white, if you move away the knight, then probably black will just happily trade the queens off the board, and it's going to be a very easy draw. Because at this point of the game, the queens are really important. If they were off the board, probably white will be really hard to have any more winning chances, because this queen has a lot of uses, especially on putting pressure on the a5 pawn, also defending the king side. So right now, moving away the knight is not a good option, and in the game, Fabiano decided to keep maneuvering and coordinating his pieces. He played rook a d1 first. There's always some c4, c5 ideas or e5 ideas at some point. And then queen c5 was played, also pinning this knight and the king now. And here in the game, Fabi decided to move away the king, move away from this very annoying pin, and he played king h1. But it turns out that here, the computer really liked this queen d4 move, offering a queen trade, because after takes, the engine just says that here, after, for example, rook e5, let's say defending the 5th rank, 95 ideas are coming, like white's knight is more active than black's knight, and the reason behind that here is that black only has this only move to defend. Rook c8 to defend the c6 pawn. All of the other moves are really bad. And after rook c8, you see that black's pieces are now kind of passive, only defending, and white will have a lot of chances. So sometimes it is also really important for you to notice or to calculate when it is the right time to trade the queens off and when is the time to keep the queens on the board. And at this point, queen d4 is actually possible, but if you want to play something else, for example, like queen f2 or king h1, it is possible as well to keep the queens on the board. It is your own choice. And in the game, Fabi decided to play king h1 to keep the position more complex. And Nodirbek played rook a e8, getting the rook out. b3 was played defending a4, very logical. Knight f6, putting some pressure on e4. Knight f5, very logical. g6, kicking the knight, but it's kind of unnecessary because the knight really doesn't do anything here on f5. Queen g5 might be an idea coming up, but if you go g6 as played in the game, first of all, it creates some really weak squares. Second of all, this knight is going to move away. Anyways, and in the game, knight e3 was played, very logical. If you want to go knight d4, which is actually slightly better than knight e3, knight d4 here, and for example, rook e5, c4 might be a possible move, and the knight can somehow, maneuver or jump to b5 at some point, attack the pawns. White has a lot of counterplay here. Black only have defending moves. In the game, knight e3 was played, however, and this shows that Fabi wants to lure this g6 move because he thinks that g6 can create some weaknesses, g7, h6, and it turns out that these two squares are actually now in white's control. White will be able to get the queen to h6 at some point, and it might be kind of annoying. In the game, b6 was played, black is still waiting, c4 was played, finally pushing the pawn, fixing the pawn structure, preventing any d5 ideas or b5 ideas. c6 is never possible because d6 will become a really huge weakness. And in the game, queen g5 was played. Now both sides just started to swing back and forth, and now starting to maneuver the pieces here. Queen d8 back, still the position is really pretty much equal. g4, okay, maybe Fabi is trying to launch a pawn storm on the king side. It takes time, of course. Rook e3, okay, now he started to create some ideas. h3 first, king g7, knight f4, rook h8. Now it's actually white needs to be careful because black is threatening to take on g4 on the next move, and also the rook is eyeing on this king. Now, but the main problem here is that here Fabi actually missed the only move to stay equal. He played all of these risky g4 moves, and his pawns are kind of floating. The position just feels kind of open in white's territory. And now, actually, black is already the side who is playing for a win because suddenly white didn't really have any clear ideas. In the game, Fabi played king g2, but he missed the only move to stay equal, which is to take on h5. Now the main point is that black doesn't do anything but plays knight e6, and after takes, go rook d5. At this point, black is still slightly better after king f8, because white's king is kind of more dangerous than black's king, but at this point it's going to be easier for white to play. However, in the game, king g2 was played, but now after h6 g4, the h file is now opened, rook e8, black decides to double the rooks on the h file at any time. And in the game, rook e1 was played, also the same idea, queen f6, but there are now some queen b2 ideas coming, really tricky. Also worth noting that Fabi here only has 34 seconds left on the clock, whereas Nodirbek still has 23 minutes left. So this is a huge time, Fabi is now under huge time pressure, so he needs to play fast, but also really accurate. In the game, he played rook h1. But this just simply gives black some chances. He should have played e5, which is a move that is not easy to see, but d takes e5, there's knight d5. And if you take with the rook, there's also knight d5. And the main point is that you cannot go knight d5 here because there's queen b2 check and king g1. Oops, what is that? King g1, and then rook h7 gonna double up the rooks. And the main difference is that now, because that you take knight d5, the queen no longer is able to go to b2 because it is blocked by its own pawn. So white sacrifices a pawn, but then prevents queen b2 also get this knight to d5, attacking the queen, and this might still be fine for white. But it's not that easy to see with only a few seconds left on the clock, and Fabi here decided to play rook h1, allowing queen b2, but here queen b2 is not even the best move. Black should just simply take on h1, which was not played in the game, and then go queen b2, because now that after, for example, here check, and then knight b3, black is going to be up a pawn and playing for a win. Knight d5, black just defends, rook c8, probably you go knight e7, but then if black doesn't want to draw, he can probably go for something like, I don't know, c6 here maybe, if black wants to be playing for a win. But here, after rook h1, Nodirbek, he unexpectedly played a mistake. He played c6. And then after knight h3, knight h3 is a really good defending move. Now, blockading this h file, because now if you go queen b2, which wasn't played in the game, if now you go queen b2 check, there's queen f2, and you basically, if you take on b3, there's queen d4 check, you lose the d6 pawn. And here, if after queen b2, if you just trade everything off, king takes, suddenly you realize that this d6 pawn is falling. So the main problem for c6, this move c6, is that here, the queen is the piece who is defending the pawn right now, but if the queens were traded off the board at some point, then this d6 pawn will be really weak in the endgame. In the game, knight h3 was played, rook d8 defending, g5 attacking the queen, queen b2 check, knight f2 block, rook takes h1, rook takes h1, and here Nodirbek played this really aggressive move, but I think he's just in a hurry. He played this move too fast, and he should have just played something like king f8 first to get the king to safety and then think about counterplay. But he played d5 immediately, which just gives white some chances. First, Fabi took on d5, c takes d5, rook d1. Suddenly, everything is being pinned here. And in the game, rook e8 should have been played, because now, first, if you take with the rook, there's queen b3 here, or, queen b3 is possible, and if you take with the pawn, there's rook e2, d6, there's queen b3, d7, well, just take the rook, because there is this pin. So, but, rook e8 is a move that is not easy to see, right? Even though Nodirbek still has 9 minutes left on the clock, but it's a really hard move. And in the game, he played another mistake, which just leads to disaster. He played knight b3, not a losing move, but then after e takes d5, knight c5, things started to get worse for black. Now it is white who is going to be playing for a win again. First, Fabi played accurately queen f4, Nodirbek played another mistake, this time losing. He played king g8. Again, rook e8 would have been the best move. Also knight d7 works here, but king g8 just loses immediately. And can you guys spot this winning move? It's a really hard move, I think, in my opinion. But after this move, it's kind of like 6-1. Black can't do anything to prevent white's next attack. And the move is king g3. A quiet move, but running away from this pin, and the knight is jumping to g4, f6, or h6 after a few moves, which is suddenly turning out to be unstoppable. Knight b7, but then queen c7, king g7. Okay, knight g4 now. You can't really take on g4. Not g4, what is that? But b7. Well, I mean, you can, but there might be some tricky checking ideas. Although you can go knight g4 here, and then there are no more checks. But in the game, Fabi decided to play knight g4 first, which is the most accurate way to win. And after rook h8, takes the knight, queen e2. Just be sure that there are no mating ideas that you allow black, or any checking things. Play rook g1 as played in the game, and after queen d2 here, the last touch, queen e7, and here queen f6 is unstoppable. Also defends the g5 pawn. There are no more checks for black, and it's game over because white is up a knight. So this game, Fabi actually played really well. He defended really well. In here, actually, where he was slightly a bit worse. But then after c6, and then d5, and then knight b3, king g8, a few mistakes in a row by Nodirbek, Fabi found the best, a great comeback, and immediately led to a win. He played a really nice game, and Nodirbek, I think he was in a hurry to win the game, and he played d5 too fast. It's too aggressive, and he should have get the king to safety first before attacking. Alright, but I hope you guys enjoyed this game, and also this just shows that Fabi clearly deserves to be the winner of the 2024 FIDE circuit with the most points and qualifying into the 2026 Candidates Tournament. Alright, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video as well as the game, and thank you for watching. Please subscribe. I'll see you in the next video. Bye!